on that, and let's listen into what he had to say, because he has in several occasions actually mentioned how frustrating it is for him and his office.
I have been fighting to ask those people that we have charged to step aside. They must step aside, and that is in the Constitution, and it's a right that we have to ask. We are not pleading. We charge you, you must step aside. And we will go all the way to the Supreme Court if we have to get that ruling. Hakuna kubembelezana.
Boss Sholei, hakuna kubembelezana. Kuna kubembelezana hapo when people are not stepping aside. Because the law, like they say, you know what it says.
Yes.
Sometimes it comes and it has to be applied as is, but the law is there to serve us.
Yes. Okay, I have the highest respect for the DPP. And I know he's extremely professional, has succeeded in many of the other jobs he's done before. But when he says that it is in the Constitution that people must step aside, that is not in the Constitution.
That's not accurate.
That is not in the Constitution. Yes. He hasn't even said which section it is. So that one I don't agree with him. And I will remember to say that to him one of these days. And then I think on the issue of stepping aside, that is within the HR manuals of in the public service, that you're required when you're charged to be interdicted. There is a process, and you are put on half pay. If you look at the judicial service, when a judge is put before a tribunal, they are suspended from duty, they are put on half pay until such time as the tribunal has finished its work. So, and that's why I'm saying we need to develop for each of the various service sectors, so that there is no doubt about it. And like we said this morning, there is a difference between people who exercise executive power and those who exercise a non-executive power. And so that it's not in the Constitution. In fact, the Constitution clearly says that one is innocent until proven guilty, and that one is entitled to fair administrative action, and it states how that should be undertaken. The Constitution also provides that one has a right to fair hearing, which means you're given a chance to defend yourself, you're given a chance to call witnesses, you're given a chance to have the best legal counsel that you want to have, and so on.
What about the question of interfering with files? And we've had cases where one has been arraigned before a court of law, but because of bail terms and that they're allowed to go back, we've had documents disappearing.
You know, let me tell you, by the time, you have to remember that by the time you're charged, the entire file is ready. And remember, by that time, even witnesses have signed witness statements. And the reason why the law was changed to make sure that we have witness statements, so that even if this witness decides to change their position, they would have to come to court and explain why they are changing from their signed witness statement under oath. So remember, that can't be changed. So already all the documents have been deposited in court. The DPP would have a backup. There would be backups everywhere. So even if the person was around, I don't see them interfering with it. Even interfering with witnesses, if you interfere with a witness, the witness would have to come to court and say, oh, by the way, I'm changing my mind about
But we cannot ignore the fact that there could be intimidation. For instance, the DPP has mentioned, and of course he would have to give evidence, and maybe he would, in regards to people who've even been threatened. For instance, if you're working for the county and the governor is the one who is under question, as a witness, you could lose your job.
Remember, by that time, you've already taken your witness statement. So there's nothing the governor can change. I'm not saying that they should stay in office or not stay. That's something to be debated. But what I'm saying is that I think, to put it simply, that the person may interfere, I think that doesn't make sense, because, I mean, if you remember, I can be in jail and I can still influence.
True.
We've seen that. It is so you don't influence by yourself. You could have a million other people who work for you who can still influence or still terrorize those people. So I think that is a very simplistic way of looking at it. The question is, we must secure the entire evidence until you have it. And if they think they need more time to secure evidence, even after they've charged the person, they can usually ask the court, can we keep the person for a further 1 week to allow us complete investigation? Usually the court has allowed them. So there is leeway for them to deal with that. And if somebody is really under threat, again, there is a law and a system to deal with that. We have the Witness Protection Agency, which is supposed to deal with that. So there is We are not a banana
The
republic.
areas
There's so
that-
many checks and balances in this country.
All right, let me come to you, Honorable Tungo. Do you think that then they should step aside? And yeah, maybe your thoughts on that.
Yeah, we need to check what happens with the other state officers. What happens with the government officials? When you are found with a crime, you are charged, the first thing they do, you are interdicted. You go on half salary, and many of the offices you don't appear there. Not even many, all. If you are a police officer interdicted, that's
keep
all.
off.
You keep off. If you are a teacher interdicted, you keep off. Now, why are we doing double standard? If it is keeping off when you have been charged, let it be keeping off by everyone else who is charged and is a state officer. I want to agree with the DPP. The reason is, and I want to agree in a very objective manner, is that some of these people are very powerful. In a manner, if they continue going to office, they'll automatically interfere with the cases in court. I know of an example of something that happened, I won't disclose fully, where a governor is telling some certain executive officers in his county, if you attend a certain function, believe you me, tomorrow you'll be out of payroll. Now assume these are the same people who are the witnesses against the governor, and the governor is coming back to that office. What will happen?
They'll obviously want to still keep
So
their
for
jobs.
me, as much as, yes, today it's another person, tomorrow it could be me, but let's not have double standards in applications of what we are doing to our people. If we have agreed if it is stepping aside, let people step aside. Until proven guilty or not, they'll come back to their office. And then again, I think in Tonga, what we need to do now, we need to do what we are doing to petition, election petitions. Because we have some timelines. So matters of this magnitude affecting such powerful people should be given some timelines so that their cases are heard and concluded within that given timeline so that they can be able to be maybe judged guilty or go back to their offices or actually dismissed. Because now, even when they have been charged that way, they are not aware of when this thing can actually be concluded. So I think you lawyers now, you need to come up, bring us timelines on such matters. Corruption matters are very serious matters. They are criminal in nature, and we need not to continue putting people in a very quagmire position.
All right, and Honorable Shole, maybe just for us to understand, what is it that makes them take so long? I mean, we're looking at even cases like the Akashas, where we see that part of their strategy was to delay, the cases going through legal means. And isn't that a way that we can circumvent and ensure that that is done? What needs to be done so that they are expedited within the shortest time possible?
Yeah.
I think there is many methods in which the judiciary can use to expedite cases. And until the judiciary makes that a major issue, because most of the time cases are driven by the people before the court as opposed to the judge. The judges have to take control of their cases. And there are many methods they can use. One method, stop hearing and admitting cases that should not be in the courts. That's number one. If that can be sorted out, then we'll remove the cases. There is a simple one, like for example, the law on succession, where you find the definition of a wife under the Marriage Act is different from the definition of a wife under the law of succession. So what happens? We have so many succession matters where the court is trying to spend years deliberating on who's a wife and who's not a wife. Why don't we just make it clear what the definition of a wife is? Do you know what? You will remove thousands, hundreds of thousands of cases from the court system. So one, clean out cases that you don't need to hear. Another one, when other matters come that don't necessarily, that need to go to arbitration and to go to mediation, the courts should ask parties to first explore that opportunity before they come back to the court. Another method to do it is to ensure also that there is more discipline in the way cases are heard. For example, criminal cases, when you charge, and I can give you this typical one of this current one of the CS Treasury. How many people are on it? There are about 20 people charged.
Yes, I think 27.
There are 27 people charged in one case. Bad strategy. You know what's going to happen? each of them will have a different lawyer. Or at least even if we say 3 of them have 1 lawyer to themselves, that makes maybe 7 lawyers. When you have 7 lawyers, 1 lawyer will be sick, another lawyer will be saying, I'm in the Court of Appeal, and then when one of the accused persons will not be available because he's in hospital, even if you say you want to hear it day to day, do you actually expect that all things will remain constant for 27 persons, 7 lawyers, and whatever?
Is it possible then that that's a bad strategy by design?
That's no. I think what has to happen is that we've got to become more innovative the way we think. If it is capable of, we are capable of having, let's say, 2 people charged alone and follow through, then you do that. You separate the cases. In other countries, actually, what has happened is instead of having 10 charges, if I know that I have 1 good charge, that I can have that person convicted, then there is no point of going for the other charges. So you choose one so that you can also make the case go more efficiently. So the prosecution has to employ strategies. Another culprit is the DPP's office itself. I have been in cases where someone comes to court, the prosecutor comes to court and says, sorry, I'm unable to proceed because my colleague who was dealing with this file is on leave, or my colleague who was dealing with this file, the father died. The question is, the reason why it is a file at the DPP's office means any prosecutor can pick it up at at any one time.
I think,
so what has happened is that we need, and I was very happy, I mean, at the time of the judiciary, there was the National Council for Administration of Justice, which has all the players in the justice sector. What they should be doing is sitting down and saying, how do we ensure that these cases can proceed day by day and faster? They also have to decide, stop amalgamating people. Look at the Anglo-Leasing cases, when they were trying to hear it, and the late Mureria, God bless his soul, was in hospital. Then the matter couldn't proceed. Or the other day you found that other people in this Kimwarer Dam case took the plea, and others were still away and needed to arrive. And then the lawyers all have to come to court and agree that their diaries are open on that day.
Okay, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I wanted to say something. I think, with all due respect to my colleague here, all said and done, we just need timelines. Because what happens in a court, or when cases are being charged, it is not different when we have petitions of elections. They go through the same way, the proceedings are the same. So what we need to do is just let's be told.
Put legal time.
Okay,
Put legal times.
Okay,
Put legal times. Tell us corruption case of this magnitude should take 1 year.
Okay.
Should take 6 months. Whatever things they will do within there, those are details to Kenyans.
Let me, I think that's a very good point you say. Let's put the timelines. But even as you put the timelines, you must look at the factors and the variables within that particular case. You cannot compare a criminal case that has 27 accused persons with an election petition that has 2 people pitting themselves. Remember, in the election petition, there is probably, there's usually by submission, written submissions. So the written submissions are given. The witnesses are normally very few, isn't it? And so what happens is that it's very, and you might find that the point is 1 or 2. Either they're asking for an order of recount and so on. So it's very easy to chart the way forward, and each case is different. If it's a construction case, it has different issues. If it's an insurance case, different.
But you see, Gitonga, you put, while you are putting those timelines, you put into consideration the complications of the matter. We are not saying actually that put the same time with the petition case of election, but considering the matters, the complication of the matter, put the timelines that befit that case.
All right.
Yeah.
I want us to conclude, and I'll give you each a minute to give us your closing remarks, starting with you, Michael Agwanda. You've been quiet for a while.
I think Honorable Shule has given us all reasons, very, very good reasons, as to how the courts need to expedite these cases we have. But one thing she didn't talk about strongly is the repercussions that comes as a result of mediocrity from some of the lawyers. She did not mention, being a lawyer, I know she need to be nice on that area.
No, actually, I just forgot. I don't have enough
Yeah,
time to tell
but,
you all.
But the truth of the matter is some of these cases are derailed strategically by the clients themselves saying, no, let this thing just go slowly. I don't want it to be concluded now. And the lawyers themselves sometimes haggling between the clients and themselves on how much they need to be paid. And before you pay this amount of money, I'm probably just going to adjourn this case, and then it goes for years and years. And so this also needs to be looked into from the representation side, and that is the lawyers. But the truth of the matter is we need to have these cases finished within a specific time for Kenyans to be seen to be getting justice for these cases that have gone to court. And I really think what Kenyans are looking for today, they've done everything. They've arrested people, they've hounded them, they've humiliated them, and all manner of things, which is right if they did these things that they're being alleged to have done. But now we want to see some of these guys go to jail and to also get the money back that they stole. Once that starts happening, especially to the big fish, the small person will follow suit, and they will be very careful.
All right, your closing remarks, Honorable Tungo, very, very briefly, please, because we're out of time.
Oh, thank you so much. I think I want to actually urge the president to continue with the same spirit, that it is good that there is the goodwill to fight against corruption, and that let's have these matters concluded within time where Kenyans cannot lose trust. Because it is trust that Kenyans have upon the system that is actually keeping us going. Otherwise, what is happening in this country is that people are feeling weary, they are feeling so much pushed, the poverty which is around with them, unemployment is too much, and when they are seeing like some people are just taking money and nobody is bothered and no results are coming after people are arrested, they may lose their trust and the patience they have. So let's go forward and let's not politicize corruption, let's not actually put it like it is a community-based and targeted war.
Honorable Gladys Bosch-Sholay, you get the last word.
I want to say, even as we support the president on his fight to against corruption, we must also become responsive as the agencies within the justice sector to ensure that we listen to what Kenyans are saying, and as what Mheshimiwa Gladwell is saying, that cases must move faster than they are actually moving now. And in order to deal with what Professor has said, Professor, like I said, the delays, I can write for you a book, and in fact I think I did my MBA research on it, on what causes delays in our court system. Sometimes it's the lawyers themselves. Yes? The lawyers sometimes decide a delay tactic is the best way to deal with this matter. So what they do is they fall sick, they tell their client to fall sick, something happens, the file gets lost, you know, they collude with the court registry to make sure that the file gets lost. We've also got the delays by the prosecution when they don't appear in court themselves. We've also got the issue of judges. You hear a judge has been transferred, and then he has left files and he's been transferred to Kisumu without prior notice and being told to complete. The last one, I know, these are my closing remarks.
Okay.
Another issue is you've had criminal cases delayed because the prisons don't have a truck to bring the prisoners to the court in order for the case to proceed. In some cases, when it's a capital offense, the law requires that you must have legal aid, which the state must provide for you. Sometimes the volunteer lawyers are not available because they were not notified in advance. So there is so many things that can change that, and until we bring everyone on the table and discuss the solutions for each of those, then it will work. And I know I've been able to do it in committee cases when I was at the judiciary. And lastly, even as we fight corruption, it is important that all the cases we bring before the courts are airtight. And we want to see a 90% conviction rate as opposed to the almost 5% conviction rate. It's not enough to hold people in court. The issue is, do you get a conviction rate? In other countries, you get discharged as a prosecutor from your job if you have anything below 85% conviction rate.
Correct.
In this country, we do not have the same standards. So yes, corruption has to be fought, but we've got to think logically. And it's a science, and it is possible, and this country can do it. But then I think it's because we are operating in silos, we must all work together. And right now, I think we have a very good Attorney General at the moment. We have the DPP who seems, but they cannot do it by themselves unless they work with everybody. But they also have to ensure that their cases are airtight.
All right, thank you very much. Honorable Gladys Bosch-Sholay, Women Rep for Uasin Gishu County, Michael Agwanda, political analyst, And last but not least, Honorable Gladwell Tungo, who is the woman rep for Baringo County. Thank you for joining us this morning on The Way It Is. And that's where we conclude The Way It Is this morning. I'll be looking through your comments a little bit later on, but for now we need to take a break and pay some bills. But do stay with us. We also have Robin Toskin lined up for you with Sports Chat and giving us an update on what's happening in the sports arena. For now, we take that break.
Thank you.
How can the DPP say it's provided the Constitution? Of course, it's not providing the Constitution. Why do people make remarks like that? But it's because Kenyans can be.